Hello, everybody. This is Michael introducing the math history. The Math, Science, and History channel, where we're going to be dealing with subjects related to mathematics and history and science. Our primary focus is on Black, American, and diaspora and global math, science, and history revelations and ideas that will catapult us to the next level. And today we want to deal with, it's really American history. In Virginia, 1831, our ancestor Nat Turner gave his life and led a team of our ancestors. Most of them were enslaved with help from the native so-called Indian ancestors to strike a blow against white supremacy. And we want to study that. We want to see what was the reaction of the white supremacists, the enslavers, those who would steal our labor and those who would steal our ideas, the life force of our people. And the generation, our inheritance, was stolen by these people. Let's look at how they wanted to keep us from knowing about what was ours. The little sneaky, slick tricks they would come up with to try to keep us confused. Okay? So that's what I want to go into today. I want everybody to subscribe to this channel and click the thumbs up button if you think this material is valuable. And share this message. Share it, click the thumbs up, press the like, press the like, press the like, press the like. You can do that. This is foundational knowledge of self. And let's get into some of the quotations from some people here.
Afraid of speaking to any human being and returning every morning to my cave before the dawn of day. I know not how long I might have led this life if accident had not betrayed me. A dog in the neighborhood passing by my hiding place one night while I was out was attracted by some meat I had in my cave and crawled in and stole it, and was coming out just as I returned. A few nights after, two Negroes having started to go hunting with the same dog and passing that way, the dog came again to the place and, having just gone out to walk about, discovered me and barked, on which, thinking myself discovered, I spoke to them to beg concealment. On making myself known, they fled from me. Knowing then they would betray me, I immediately left my hiding place and was pursued almost incessantly until I was taken a fortnight afterwards by Mr. Benjamin Phipps in a little hole I had dug out with my sword for the purpose of concealment under the top of a fallen tree. On Mr. Phipps's discovering the place of my concealment, he cocked his gun and aimed at me. I requested him not to shoot, and I would give up, upon which he demanded my sword. I delivered it to him, and he brought me to prison. During the time I was pursued, I had many hairbreadth escapes, which your time will not permit me to relate. I am here loaded with chains and willing to suffer the fate that awaits me.
The Commonwealth versus Nat Turner. Charged with making insurrection and plotting to take away the lives of divers free white persons and so forth on the 22nd of August, 1831. The court having met for the trial of Nat Turner, the prisoner was brought in and arraigned, and upon his arraignment pleaded not guilty, saying to his counsel that he did not feel so. On the part of the Commonwealth, Levi Waller was introduced, who, being sworn, deposed agreeable to Nat's own confession. Colonel Tresvant, the committing magistrate, was then introduced, who, being sworn, enumerated Nat's confession to him as given. The prisoner introduced no evidence, and the case was submitted without argument to the court, who, having found him guilty, Jeremiah Cobb, Esquire, chairman, pronounced the sentence of the court in the following words. Nat Turner, stand up. Have you anything to say why sentence of death should not be pronounced against you?
I have not. I have made a full confession to Mr. Gray, and I have nothing more to say.
Attend then to the sentence of the court. You have been arraigned and tried before this court and convicted of one of the highest crimes in our criminal code. You have been convicted of plotting in cold blood the indiscriminate destruction of men, of helpless women, and of infant children. The evidence before us leaves us not a shadow of a doubt but that your hands were often imbued in the blood of the innocent, and your own confession tells us that they were stained with the blood of a master, in your own language, too indulgent. Could I stop here, your crime would be sufficiently aggravated. But the original contriver of a plan, deep and deadly, one that can never be effected, you managed so far to put it into execution as to deprive us of many of our most valuable citizens. And this was done when they were asleep and defenseless, under circumstances shocking to humanity. And while upon this part of the subject, I cannot but call your attention to the poor, misguided wretches who have gone before you. They are not few in number. They were your bosom associates, and the blood of all cries aloud and calls upon you as the author of their misfortune. Yes, you forced them unprepared from time to eternity. Borne down by this load of guilt, your only justification is that you were led away by fanaticism. If this be true, from my soul I pity you.
Now, just for us to contextualize this, this is from the Confessions of Nat Turner. It was read by Brock Peters. This is the type of propaganda that the white supremacists love to leave in our possession so that when we look back and try to see what happened in the past, we would have their perspective and then their twist on these situations. But we should never trust it. We should always cross-reference it. We should always look for the testimony of our own ancestors in their own words, in their own publications. Those are the most valuable eyes, because black eyes, that we see things differently than the white supremacists see things. And, Nat Turner and the army, the brothers that fought with him, they were doing a valuable freedom fighting uprising. They let the white supremacists know, they let the future know, they let us all know that black people have a point. We are not slaves by nature. We are not enslaved by nature. This was training in us, and it goes against our nature. And we could kill just like the enemy can kill. And we were being killed. Our labor was being stolen. We were being brutalized. And these white supremacist people thought that this was a natural thing to us. They thought that we were happy like this. Maybe they were happy. Well, no, we're not happy. In Nat Turner and there was no innocent people there. Those were thieves. America is a thief nation. It's a nation that is built upon stolen land, stolen labor, and stolen ideas. So anybody that participates in that, whether they know it or not, they were victimized by their stealing and their thieving ancestors. Okay? Not by the ones who want to take possession of what is rightfully ours. Our decision making is our own. So we want to go into this part of let's look at this part of Nat. I'm going to share the screen. And these brothers are going to go into some more history of Nat Turner. And this is why I want to hear it from them, is because these are ancestors who got the word from the mouth of the people who lived there. And so this is what we're going to do here.
He was away for those 30 days. He did a lot of studying and praying. This is one of the most sacred spots. This place up here, before you get to the hedge of trees, that's where a cabin where Nat Turner's wife lived with the children. Nat Turner's wife's name was Cherry.
Okay.
And she lived here with his children. And there's always been speculation about where Nat Turner was on the day that the revolt started.
Mm-hmm.
We have reason to believe he at least visited his wife and children.
So the cabin was right out here.
It's right up here at the edge of that field. And I have pictures of people coming and streaming up here, getting off the bus down there and coming in like they're going to a pilgrimage. But one day, I brought a tour group out here, and we came up in here to visit the cabin as usual, and the cabin was down. Somebody had taken it down.
Wow. So recently the cabin was still up here.
Yes.
But
yes.
somebody came and knocked it down.
No, they didn't take it and knock it down. The same Francis family.
Mm.
The Turner family do not farm the land.
Yeah.
The land. The land is farmed. They rent this farm to the Francis family.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a big farm. This is the land over here. This land is owned. It's a 380 tract of land by Nat Turner's living descendants. They own that.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was purchased.
Y'all supposed to say, how did they come to own it?
It was purchased by a family member.
Okay.
Nat Turner's descendants survived because the Indians hid out a female member.
Mm.
And I had the good fortune of meeting Miss. Any reason you stop here?
Oh, want to keep going? Okay.
You know, going up here and turn around and stop where the cabin was. But anyway, that's how it came in there. And then a woman married a guy named Turner.
Okay.
And that's how they came into this land.
Nice.
He bought the land.
That's a blessing right there in itself.
Yeah, yes, it is.
That was very humble.
And the land has a lot of stress. What they did, like tearing this cabin down,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the other structures that was on black land,
Mm-hmm.
they convinced them to tear the structures down, and then they started getting the money in to develop the tool.
Gotcha.
You know,
I was coming back down to the money. Huh?
Yeah, yeah. And from here, you.
So this is just showing you too how, you know, some of the the natives. What's going on, everybody? Press the thumbs up for me. Press the thumbs up button for me. And go ahead and share this little message to your social media. This is the first video on this channel. And I want to make this channel, this is Michael, I want to make this channel for math, science, and history dedicated, okay? And so that's what I'm going to be doing. So I want you to go up there and press that little subscribe button to this one. And we're dealing with Henry Berry right now. So this really in the debate in the Virginia House of Delegates back in 1832 to end slavery. This was the debate in the North, but it was spurred on by the sacrifice that our ancestor Nat Turner put in. And so we want to put some of this in. We want to try to find some, decent perspective, because all of our history, we're going to have to put it in our own perspective. That's pretty much what's going to have to happen, because we have to really relearn every single thing, because the perspectives that we got it from was not, basically everything is twisted, messed up. So I just want to look at this here. Now, when they captured Nat Turner, they killed everybody that they knew that was associated with it. They burned all the history so that they can go to twist, turn, and, just misconstrue what was actually true. From the reports that I read, I'm not going to show them all. They killed them, skinned them, boiled Nat Turner, made grease out of his body. They used to use this in all sorts of seances and sorts of little mysticisms. We'll look at his skull, which was just recently returned to some of his living descendants. And let's just look at this part. Now, if we look at the skull here, we see a perfect cut. This is a saw. So they took his brain out. Okay. They took his brain out. And this is pretty professional. And we look at this skull. There was all sorts of cuts and bruises on it. And, just be aware of that.
It is my honor to present this remains to you.
Being able to hold that piece of his body that he couldn't own.
Let's read this real quick.
Remains.
Richard Hatcher, the first black mayor of Gary, Indiana, came into possession of the alleged skull in 2002. They don't want to tell you how he came into possession of it, where he got it from, but somehow he found that this was Nat Turner's skull, and he wanted to present that to the family instead of letting them continue to hide this history.
To you.
Being able to hold that piece of his body that he couldn't own for himself, we'll be able to treat it with the respect and honor that it is due, that we're going to be able to give him the burial that he deserves.
We're here representing the generations before us.
Sure.
We're just messengers.
Sure.
Brethren.
And we're not going to look at this whole thing. I want to read this part. On the night of the 21st and the 22nd August 1831, Nat Turner, a slave preacher, well, he was enslaved. He was a preacher. He began the insurrection. They claim it grew to about 70. They moved northeast to Southampton County. seat in Jerusalem, now Cortland. They changed the name, killing about 60 whites, probably more. After 2 days, militiamen and armed civilians basically stopped it. So they give themselves credit. And basically 30 people were hung. Okay. So let's go into this here. Now, after that, you had a thing that started in January, after Nat Turner was dead and killed. In January, there was 1832 debate on slavery in Virginia, clashing scenes and terministic screens. Okay. So basically, they had a debate to try to end slavery. To them, it was too dangerous. They wanted to go ahead and cut this thing out. So let's look at it. We're going to look at some of this here. And this is from the Journal of the Kenneth Burke Society. And that's one thing we're going to try to get into a little bit more of. We're going to try to learn some more about these these societies that they use to keep history going. And shout out to Tariq Nasheed. He has a hidden history museum to try to preserve some authentic Black history that's rarely spoken of. And I do support that. So following the Nat Turner Rebellion, the Virginia state legislature held a debate in early 1832 over the abolition of slavery in the state. Two sides, pro-abolitionists and traditionalists, sparred over a 2-week period using dramatic analysis. I undertake a case study of the debate looking specifically for the terministic screens used by each side to ascertain their worldviews that ultimately led to the narrow defeat of the pro-abolitionists. Okay, so let's see. Let's look up this definition real quick. Terministic screens. See what this is. I want to make sure we understand all of this here. Let's do the Google. And everybody press the thumbs up. Go ahead and give us okay. So a terministic screen is a term in the theory and criticism of rhetoric, of talking. Okay. So let's look at this. What is this? Let's do it. Let's look at this thing. So terministic screen. Kenneth Burke, terministic screen and definitions of man. Everything covered but her eyes. What a cruel male-dominated culture. Okay. Nothing covered but her eyes. What a cruel male-dominated culture. So basically, it is a narrative that people use to justify their existence. This is pretty much what I'm getting from this picture, a terministic screen. Let's see what Wikipedia says. All right. Kenneth Burke develops the terministic screen in his book of essays called Language as Symbolic Action in 1966. He defines the concept as screen composed of terms through which humans perceive the world. A screen composed of terms through which humans perceive the world, and that direct attention away from some interpretations and towards others. Burke offers the metaphor to explain why people interpret messages differently based on the construction of symbols, meanings, and therefore reality. Words convey a particular meaning, conjuring images and ideas. So a terminus extreme is basically how people use these images to explain reality to themselves. All right, so let's get back into this here. So for 2 weeks, Richmond was awash with citizens of all classes and slave-holding statuses. They came to witness a spectacle new to the American South. In January 1832, members of the state legislature formally debated the abolition of slavery in Virginia. Newspapers described the momentous event, claiming, "We have never heard any debate so eloquent, so sustained, and in which so great a number of speakers had appeared and commanded the attention of so numerous and intelligent an audience. Day after day, multitudes throng to the Capitol and have been compensated by eloquence which would have illustrated Rome or Athens." Okay. Governor John Floyd wrote in his diary, "Nothing now is talked of or creates an interest but the debate on the abolition of slavery." Okay. The openness and candor of the delegates, coupled with the intense public and press scrutiny, produced an attention the likes of which Virginia never again lavished on the charged subject. All right, and the openness, because they were very quiet. The white society is trained to be quiet on certain things. Okay, they're trained to hide certain conversations. All right, so basically the deliberations represent only a footnote in history, overshadowed by the growing abolitionist movements in the North and the nullification crisis in the South. It is, however, a defining moment in the history of Southern oratory, political oratory on the slave issues, particularly the urgent calls for gradual emancipation presaged many of the arguments. So they wanted gradual emancipations. So they presaged many of the arguments and debates that constitute the rhetoric of desperation, characterizing the South up until the war between the states. The catalyst for this event, however, remains more than a historical note. Okay, so the catalyst for this event, so they're telling you here that this is where they decided to start gradually emancipating. And that remained the South from 1832, basically start to let people go, let enslaved Black folks go. And that remained until the war, until they created that pressure, until the Civil War happened, which was about 30 years later. Okay. So we know that Nat Turner had the rebellion and the uprising. And the way they characterize it, basically that night, he and his followers tore through Jerusalem, and they renamed this city from Jerusalem, as we've seen, to Corsica. He and his followers tore through Jerusalem, Virginia, leaving 57 whites shot, axed, and bludgeoned to death. Rumor of the uprising spread quickly, fueled by grisly reports such as that published in Richmond's Constitutional Whig on August 22nd, 1831. It was hardly in the power of rumor itself to exaggerate the atrocities which has been perpetrated by the insurgents. Okay, so they're using that term insurgents on us, on our people. Whole families, fathers, mother, daughters, sons sucking babies, and school children butchered, thrown in heaps, and left to be devoured by hogs and dogs, or to putrefy on the spot. At Mr. Levy Waller's, his wife and 10 children were murdered and piled in one bleeding heap on the floor. They wasn't playing. So fear of similar revolts from slaves viscerally gripped the outlying slave states, Maryland, New Jersey, Delaware, and Kentucky. Though to the deep South, Virginians dreaded a second rebellion, and no attempt by politicians and newspapers could soothe the public's apprehension at the thought of approximately 470,000 slaves, almost 40% of the state's total population. Now, we was always told that we were 13% of the population, but obviously we were the majority of the population in many places. So this is what they were terrified about. So they they were just terrified at the thought that 470,000 enslaved black folks would pile an open revolt. Okay. Joseph Robert wrote that until Nat Turner's capture on October 31st, the whites living in heavily black populated sections of Virginia hung dangerously near the panic stage, ready to spring into action at the slightest provocation. The following months, other slave states took action to curb growing slave populations. Okay, you see, so what Nat Turner did here, so we see it changed the behavior of the white folks. They began to reduce the population of enslavement. They wanted to get rid of that because they began to realize that this was very dangerous, and in the way they were treating people, stealing labor, stealing ideas, treating people like property and like animals when they knew people never were animals. This was dysfunctional and it would kill them. Okay. So on December 5th, 1831, Governor Floyd declared his commitment to ending slavery in Virginia. All right. The House of Delegates responded promptly, creating a committee of 13 members to discuss the insurrectionary movements of the slaves and the removal of the free persons of color. So they not only wanted to get rid of the black enslaved people, but they wanted to get rid of the free persons of colors. And that's representative now today of what they call the working class black folk and the middle class black folk. The middle class black folk thinks that the white people approve of them because they have a little bit of money. And that does not pan out because that's not part of their history. So let's keep going. Now, this dude, let's see here. After laborious proceedings, committee chairman William Broadnax requested that 8 additional men join his ranks. Thus, the final composition of the committee was 16 Easterners and 5 Westerners. Okay. And Westerners just mean the west side of Virginia. Eastern Virginia had more representatives because it was more populous and heavily dependent upon slave labor. A discussion continued. The delegates coalesced into 2 main factions, labeled here as traditionalists, those who believe that slavery should remain in place, and activists, those who urge change, and generally in the form of gradual emancipation. On January 10th, 1832, traditionalist William Goode inquired after the progress of the committee. Broadnax replied that any apparent tardiness consisted of 2 main problems: the removal of the So I'm just making sure that I got that right. So replied that any apparent tardiness consisted of two main problems: the removal of the free Negroes and gradual emancipation. On January 11th, Good, feeling the interests of his slaveholding constituents threatened, signed a resolution that he believed could keep the issue from reaching the floor. Thomas Jefferson Randolph moved immediately to amend the resolution, which, contrary to Good's intention, opened the floor to debate. For the next 2 weeks, the delegates engaged in a historical sparring match over the merits and morality of slavery, its open discussion, and abolition. All right. So basically, this is where they had this big debate. They describe them here as traditionalists and abolitionists and activists. Some of them, all of them, none of them really loved black folks. They were scared. Okay. They wanted the money. All of them, most of them were slave holders. Okay. But they were scared because they realized there was too many black folks. Haiti had took its freedom. They were terrified of slave revolts. Okay. And this is one thing that black folks need to understand. They spend a lot of time making you feel that you're nothing and telling you that your history is nothing because they're terrified. They do not want us to take over and run things the way we see fit. You see, because they've done so much evil, stolen so much money. This is the reason why the reparations call terrifies them. They will do anything and give money to anybody. They will bring in totally new people into the country, immigrants. It'll just come here, take these jobs, rather than simply be fair to the black citizens of this country, because they don't want all of this stuff being uncovered, and they don't want to answer for this stuff. And I mean, if they were smart, they would have just played it correctly and say, hey, those were our ancestors. We want to repair this issue. But no, they want to keep it buried because they want to keep stealing. And so from here, now, and this article goes on a lot. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but basically it shows, although many of the observation is basically it's talking about how they talked about a sense of shared. They wanted to stop direct slavery, and they wanted to get some type of shared prosperity. Basically, they were going to enslave us as a collective. And I believe that's what they have right now, a shared substance. You see? And let's look at this. It was one other part that I wanted to get in on this. So the debate. For the traditionalist members of the legislature, the debate itself seemed unwise, a foolish endeavor they needed to curtail as quickly as possible. They didn't even want to have this discussion because they didn't want this in the record. They don't want these things in the record. Okay, so people could forget about them. Ironically, it was the traditionalist William Good's resolution to bar the discussion of any plans for manumission, and manumission means, releasing people of enslavement, that inadvertently allowed members of the legislature to spar. The activists' first order of business then addressed this issue should the legislature even discuss slavery. Some of the activists dwelled on this subject for large portions of their orations, making it a focal point in the debate, an issue with which they easily attack traditionalists. James McDowell offers a telling example in his forceful introduction. And I think James McDowell was the one that he is one of the ones who wanted to bar slavery. He wanted gradual manumission. Okay. And sir, I would not break the silence now. I would not open the lips with which discretion should seal, were it not that the question which we are discussing and the discussion itself have brought a crisis on the country, have brought up a measure for decision here of such eventful influence over the social structure and condition of the state as to demand that, guided only by his judgment and his conscience, he should stand forth firmly and deliberately and take his position upon it. So basically, he's saying that, we almost got killed by these slaves. We got to talk about this. Okay. McDowell claimed that the debate had long been repressed. So they should have been talking about this a long time ago. They kept quiet. The debate had long been repressed by unmanly apprehensions or smothered as the dream of impractical benevolence, as if we're doing them a favor. You see, they think giving us reparations or doing the right thing is doing us a favor, and we don't deserve to be done a favor. Okay? They think doing us a favor is reparations or setting people free, giving people the back, what basically trying to get people back on a firm footing, which you took from them with your enslavement process. But it actually protects them. But some of them can't see that. So, like many others, he argued that every representative, by the nature of his position, had a right and obligation to fully address an issue of such great concern to the populace. The activists appealed to a common sense of duty, patriotism, manliness, and all virtues lauded in antebellum Southern rhetoric. Robert Powell cried, "Sir, a crisis is at hand. This great question is obliged to be met. It can no longer be evaded. And it becomes to us as men, as patriots, to meet it with firmness and decision, yet with caution and circumspection." William Summers called the debate "duty to ourselves." William Rowan claimed it was the bar of patriotism. Philip Bowling demanded open, bold, and manly discussion. Summers, Rowland, and Boiling. Further, Boiling claimed that no man who is firmly convinced that he is sustained by reason and justice hesitates to confront his adversary. Now, who is his adversary? His adversary is their adversary, us, the enslaved people. We just the ones that got stolen from, okay? So Thomas Jefferson Randolph, the grandson of Thomas Jefferson, chided the representatives, claiming they had the sagacity of an ostrich who, if it hides its eye behind a pebble, imagine its huge body concealed from its enemies. Stressing norms of virility. Okay, so basically, you're not a man if you can't talk about this. Okay, James Chandler acknowledged the attending females, noting the mirth and happiness in their eyes. He then goaded the men, proclaiming, "And shall man, fearless man, whose boast and pride it is to be regardless of danger and shrink from the discussion of that which lovely woman with all her tender sensibilities and timid apprehensions smiles at?" Okay, so appeals to the manly virtues did serve as a motivating leverage, but did not squelch the opposition. The traditionalists wished to avoid discussion. They didn't want to talk about it, okay, because they felt it would lead to widespread malcontent and possibly incite additional slave revolts because they knew the black folks was listening. They tried to pretend like we were stupid, but they knew, these smart ones knew that we weren't dumb and we were listening to them. William Gold described the position. The debate is creating great pain and anxiety among a large portion of the citizens of the state, and it will raise expectation in the minds of the colored population, doomed to a disappointment which could not fail to endanger the feelings highly injurious and dangerous to all parties. Basically, if they think they're going to get freed and then we don't free them, they'll kill us. And that's kind of how they're thinking of us right now with reparations. We can't talk about reparations. We shouldn't talk about it. If we talk about it, they might think they're going to get it. And when we say they're not going to get it, they'll kill us. You know, this is how they think. But we're going to press the issue because guess what? It's going to happen. We're getting reparations. Just like we got freed in this enslavement process, we're going to get our reparations. We're going to get our land, and we're going to keep pushing because we're woke now. It's what's called woke. All right. So the debate was even more complex for politicians from Western Virginia. The West had far fewer slaves, and most citizens wanted to maintain this balance. Western representative outnumbered approximately 3-1, had a twofold task. They had to convince the House to debate, number one, and explain how they, as Westerners, ostensibly had little vested interest, could proclaim their views on slavery. Once again, ideals of democracy and duty came to the fore. Speakers also described the state as one entity, a tactic to lessen perceived differences. Okay. Faulkner defended his position by connecting the tenets of democracy and the notion that slavery directly impacted Western Virginia. I am disposed to accord the East exclusive legislation upon this and every other question, where the consequences of that legislation can alone affect themselves. So in fundamentally and vitally concerns my own people. Okay. So according to Faulkner, slavery had become a measure of vital policy with the West, for slave populations would move over the mountains into their domain. The West was now in the same situation that the East was 100 years earlier. Slaves are being imported, but the West wished they weren't. Okay. So that's basically to give you the outline. Now, Henry Berry, we have this here. He made a particularly important speech to us today because it kind of spoke to some of how they handle us. And this is something for Black folks to understand. We get handled in a certain way. And we get manipulated in a certain way. And you can only be manipulated if you're ignorant. So they preserved, his speech must have been so good, they preserved it in this little book here, and it's been widely circulated. Minister Farrakhan has referred to this speech, and many people have referred to this speech. So we're going to kind of go through some of this speech. I don't want to read every single, because I don't like reading everything on some of this stuff. But because y'all can look at some of this here yourselves. But this is the speech, So Henry Berry was one of the activists. It's due to Mr. Berry to state his speech in The Abolition of Slavery has been published in its present form by gentlemen favorable to the views which he has advocated, not by himself. So he didn't publish this himself. People who were favorable to his views published this. All right. So, House of Delegates of Virginia, Wednesday, January 11th, 1832, Mr. Good of Mecklenburg rose to move the following resolution. Remember, he's the one that said he didn't want no talking. So the resolution, let's look at this here. Actually, I need to zoom it. Let's zoom it. Resolved that the select committee raised on the subject of slaves, free Negroes, and the melancholy occurrences. You see, that's Nat Turner. You see how this is something very important that Black folks need to understand. The white supremacists they think in the past, present, and future tense. So they hide their stuff with, euphemisms and, different languages. So that the select committee raised on the subject of slaves, free Negroes, and the melancholy occurrences growing out of the tragical massacre in Southampton be discharged from the consideration of all petitions, memorials, and resolutions which have for their object the manumissions of persons held in servitude under the existing laws of this commonwealth, and that it not be expedient to legislate on the subject. So they don't want to talk about it. Mr. Randolph moved the following substitute be inserted after the word Southampton. Be instructed. And they just blocked that out. Okay. So be instructed to inquire into the expediary and submitting to the vote of qualified voters in the several towns, cities, boroughs, and counties of this commonwealth, the property of providing by law that the children of all female slaves who may be born in this state on or after the 4th day of July, 1840, so 8 years from their present time, 4th of July, shall become the property of the Commonwealth, the males at the age of 21 years and females at the age of 18 years, if detained by their owners within the limits of Virginia until they shall respectively arrive at the ages aforesaid, to be hired out until the net sum arising therefrom shall be sufficient to defray the expense of their removal beyond the limits of the United States, and that said committee have leave to report by bill otherwise. Basically, it looks like they wanted Black folks to become the property of the state. So you become the property of the state, and you will be hired out, and that money would be used to replace the cost of your owners losing you until they can kick you out of the United States. That's what that says to me. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it. Okay. So on Monday, January 16th, so that's 5 days later. So Mr. Broadnax from the Committee on the Colored Population presented the following report. The Select Committee, to which was referred certain memorials praying the passage of some of the law providing for the gradual abolition of slavery in the Commonwealth, have according to order had the same under consideration, and have come to the following resolution thereupon. Resolved as the opinion of this committee that it is expedient for the present legislator to make any legislative enactment for the abolition of slavery. Mr. Preston moved that the resolution reported from the committee be amended by striking out the word inexpedient and inserting the word expedient. Okay. All right. So let's read what Mr. Berry. Mr. Berry rose and addressed the House. Mr. Speaker, coming from a country in which there are about 4,000 slaves, myself being a slaveholder, coming from a county in which there are about 4,000 slaves, myself being a slaveholder, and I may say further that the largest interest in property that I have in Virginia lies about 100 miles east of the Blue Ridge and consists of land and slaves. Under these circumstances, I hope I shall be excused by my Eastern brethren for saying a few words on this important and deeply interesting subject, that slavery is a grinding curse upon this state. I had supposed would have been admitted by all, and that the only question for debate here would have been the possibility of removing the evil. So basically, we should say, damn, we know slavery is evil. We should try to be figuring out how we're going to get out of this. Okay. But, sir, in this I have been disappointed. I have been astonished to find that there are advocates here for slavery with all of its effects. Sir, this only proves how very far we may be carried by the pecuniary interest, by getting that money. We just trying to get money. We're not worried about morality. Okay, this is where your moral foundation was destroyed in your founding foundation here. Sir, this only proves how very far we may be carried by pecuniary interests. It proves what has been said by immortal Bard, that no man is uncool, weak, and little to be trusted. If self the wavering balance shake, 'tis rarely just right adjusted. Okay. So basically, if you're about to be broke, you're not going to be right. All right. Sir, I believe that no cancer on the physical body was ever more certain, steady, and fatal in its progress than this cancer on the political body of the state of Virginia. It is eating into our very vitals. And shall we admit that the evil is past remedy? Shall we act the part of a puny patient suffering under the ravages of a fatal disease? Who would say the remedy is too painful, the dose is too nauseous? I cannot bear it. And who would close his eyes in despair and give himself up to death? No, sir, I would bear the knife and the cautery for the sake of health. I would never despair of the republic. For myself, I would abandon hope on this subject and the state to, let me get this right. I would abandon hope and state, hold on, let me get my spot back. Oh, no. I would never despair of the republic. For myself, I would abandon hope on this subject and the state together. But, sir, as long as there is a hope that this evil will be removed, I will stick to the good old Dominion. And I believe there are thousands in this state who feel as I do on this subject. If we do not give it up, what shall we gain by the delay? It is the evil being diminished? No, sir. Like a mighty avalanche, It is rolling towards us, accumulating weight and impetus at every turn. And see, this is what they seen here. They knew that this was going the wrong way for them. Okay. And it's rolling like a mighty avalanche towards us, accumulating weight. This is the reparations and impetus at every turn. And sir, if we do nothing to arrest its progress, it will ultimately overwhelm, destroy us forever. The gentleman from Mecklenburg who opened this debate seemed to think that great excitement and strange delusions had been produced by the action of this House before this debate began. I think the gentleman was entirely mistaken. Whatever excitements or delusions may have existed among the people before this debate began were produced by causes anterior to any motion on the subject of this House. The tragedy of Southampton had aroused the people of Virginia from a fatal lethargy on this subject, and I ardently hope it may produce some as glorious results for this state as did some of the tragedies recorded in the annals of antiquity for ancient Rome. If the gentleman from Mecklenburg is not entitled to the merit of producing the debate, he is certainly entitled to the merit of accelerating it and probably of giving to it a much more expanded and discursive character than it would have received had it been deferred until the committee had reported. I, for one, am grateful to him for it. I believe it is high time that this subject should be discussed and considered by the people of Virginia. I believe that the people are woke. The people are woke. The people are awakened on the subject, but not alarmed. I believe they will consider it calmly and decide upon it correctly. Sir, I have no fears now for any general results from any efforts at insurrection by this unfortunate class of our population. You see, this is how they refer to Black people, the unfortunate class. I know that we have the power to crush any such effort at a blow. I know. You see, this is how confident they were. I know that any such effort on their part at this day will end in the annihilation of all concerned in it. And I believe our greatest security now is in their knowledge of these things, in their knowledge of their own weakness. Okay, this is very important for us. This makes them feel safe, that we feel weak. We must feel weak for them to feel safe. I believe that this is them saying they believe our greatest security now is in their knowledge of these things, in their knowledge of their own weakness. None but the most ignorant and fanatical will attempt it now. The better informed Cooney type, the better informed, knowing the effort is hopeless, desperate, will not make it. The Southampton affair was the work of the most ignorant, deluded wretches on earth. That was a small affair. It has affected the general safety of the state, but it was a most horrible tragedy. The attitude of the citizens of this state in relation to this danger is one of the most distressing insecurity individually. We are like a crowd of people towards whom a single man should point a loaded gun with the apparent intent to fire upon them. They know he cannot kill them all, but each feels that his own life is in peril. Here we know not when, how, or where this evil may assail us. I admire the philosophy, not to use a harsher term, of the gentleman from Brunswick, which enabled him to turn the whole Southampton affair into ridicule. So they started laughing at it. He told us that he had witnessed that tragedy, or a part of it. Sir, I had witnessed that tragedy. Sir, had I witnessed that tragedy, I am sure I could never have thought of it and smiled. But sir, although I have no fears for any general results from the efforts of this class of our population now, still, sir, the time will come when there will be imminent general danger. Pass as severe laws as you will to keep these unfortunate creatures in ignorance. It is in vain unless you can extinguish that spark of intellect which God has given them. Let any man who advocates slavery examine the system of laws that we have adopted. From stern necessity, it may be said. Okay? So basically, they want to extinguish the spark of intellect. They don't even want us to even feel like learning nothing. They want to take what God gave us. Let any man who advocates slavery examine the system of laws that we have adopted. From stern necessity, may be said, towards these creatures. You see, they refer to black people as creatures. And he may shed a tear upon that, and would to God, sir, the memory of it might thus be blotted out forever. Sir, we have as far as possible closed every avenue by which light might enter their minds. Okay? We have only to go one step further to extinguish the capacity to see the light, and our work would be completed. They would then be reduced to the level of the beast of the field, and we should be safe. You see? So this is a very important part here, and this is what the Minister Farrakhan is referred to. Their objective in dealing with us is to not only make us dumb, but make us not even want to be smart. You a smart nigga, ain't you? And then punish you. Okay? And this is what makes them feel safe. Okay? They're looking for smart niggers. So they want to, sir, we have as far as possible closed every avenue by which light might enter their minds. They can't read. We have only to go one step further to extinguish the capacity to see the light, and our work would be completed. They would be reduced to the level of the beast of the field, and we would be safe. And I am not certain that we would not do it if we could find out the necessary process. So they went to looking in their scientific research, and that under the plea of necessity. But sir, this is impossible, and can be in the midst of a free man, and can be in the midst of freemen and not know what freedom is. And can a man be in the midst of freemen and not know what freedom is? Can he feel that he has the power to assert his liberty, and will he not do it? Yes, sir. With the certainty of the current time, he will do it whenever he has the power. Sir, to provide that the time will come, he will have the power. Sir, to prove that the time will come, I need offer no other argument than the arithmetic, the conclusions from which are clear demonstrations on this subject. The data are before us all, and every man can work out the process for himself. Sir, a death struggle must come between the two classes in which one or the other will be extinguished forever. Who can contemplate such a catastrophe as even possible and being indifferent or inactive? Sir, the right of property in the colored class generally has been brought into this debate, and I am sorry for it. It is not to be treated in the abstract, but I think our Eastern brethren are to blame for it. They rather arrogantly advanced that their right of property as an insuperable barrier to our doing anything for the removal of the evil act of slavery, and rather challenged an investigation of their title, and it has been rather rudely handled in this debate. Yet, sir, I am for maintaining the bonds by which we hold this property now. See, yes, sir, I am for maintaining the bonds by which we hold this property now with firmness and with vigilance, because it is necessary to the public safety that we should do so, and because there are vested rights to this property under the law as it now is. Sir, I should be glad that this House should declare unanimously that the relations between master and slave should not be disturbed, that none of the present generation should be removed except those who may be given up voluntarily. But, sir, the plea of necessity will not answer in bar to a scheme for the future gradual emancipation and removal of this class. So this man did predict the Civil War. That measure is within our power. The evil was gradually entailed upon us and can only gradually be removed. I admit that we are not to be blamed for the origin of this evil among us. We are not to be blamed for its existence now, but we shall deserve the severest censure if we do not take measures as soon as possible to remove it. Sir, every obligation of justice and humanity demands the safety of the republic demands the adoption and removal of this whole class. So they wanted to just completely steal our labor and get rid of us. To liberate the afterborn is obviously practicable. It has been recommended by the immortal Jefferson, who counsels we have followed in so many things, with such signal benefits, but have totally disregarded in this. So we listen to Thomas Jefferson, but accept in this. It has been done by our sister states, and the only objection of any force that I have heard urged is the constitutional one, founded upon the attenuated, contemptible rights of property in these afterborn children, which is placed in competition with the lives of our own sons and daughters, to the remotest generations in competition with the very existence of this republic. So basically, these kids, if we don't get rid of these kids, they're going to be competing against our children, which is true. Okay, sir, I am sick with the clamor in this debate about this property, this wealth. I consider it all a mere trash when weighed against the public safety. The right of property in slaves is entirely the creature of the positive law. All of our rules of property are under the control of the legislator. Our law of descents, distribution, and can be altered by the legislator whenever it shall seem expedient. And these are some words I need to look up. For Tory, can the legislator alter the rule with regard to property and slaves, because the right is purely the creature of the legislator. So I'm going to end this right here. I'm not going to read the rest, but I'll probably, I might go back to this. But really the main issue with this particular debate here, the speech of Henry Berry should be studied, especially by Black people, because it tells us some of the tactics and some of the objectives that the white supremacists have, because they have a fear of us being woke. And we also can apply some of these tactics into the reparations debate. And this is the reason why I wanted to try to go over this, to get us into it so we know what was up and what's going on, guys. Let me know what you think about this thing. If you think it was, just put a comment. Let it be known. We want to try to get some more of this going on, get some other subjects in history so that we can try to unlock ourselves, unlock our minds. We need to get that light. We need to get the desire to learn back. Okay. So that's it for now, guys, and appreciate you guys for coming out, whoever came out. This is the Math, Science, and History channel. Peace.
Thank you.